Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to speak to you about a subject that is often misunderstood, yet it holds significant importance in understanding the spiritual dynamics of our world, the 5 marks of a witch. Witchcraft is a force that goes beyond what we often see portrayed in popular media or hearsay. It's a spirit, a force that seeks to control, deceive, manipulate, and ultimately dominate. Understanding the marks of a witch helps us recognize these influences in our own lives and the lives of others. The first mark of a witch is control. At the heart of witchcraft is a relentless desire for dominance. Witches do not seek to serve others or to build them up, they seek to control. They manipulate situations, emotions, and people for personal gain. This desire for control can take many forms. It may be subtle, disguised as concern or care, but it's always with the intention of bending someone's will to their own. We have the spirit of deception. A witch is not easily recognized because they are skilled in deception. They do not reveal their true intentions. Instead, hide behind a mask of kindness, friendship, or love. But beneath that mask is a different agenda, an agenda to lead others astray, to take control, to use them for their own benefit. Deception is their weapon, and they wield it carefully. The third mark is manipulation of others' wills. Witches possess a unique ability to sway the decisions, actions, and thoughts of others. They do this through charm, persuasive words, or even subtle influence over time. They may plant ideas or suggestions that seem innocent, yet are meant to steer someone toward a path they themselves have chosen. The witch never truly empowers, they always control, even in the guise of helping. Next, we must understand the witch's use of fear and intimidation. Fear is a powerful tool in the hands of a witch. It is the means by which they paralyze their victims, cloud their judgment, and weaken their resolve. They use fear to isolate, to keep others from seeing the truth, and to create chaos in their lives. A life led by fear is a life in bondage, and the witch knows how to keep others in that state. The fifth mark is disharmony and division. The witch excels at creating strife. They have a unique ability to sow division in families, in friendships, in communities, and in relationships. Where there was once peace, there is now tension. Where there was unity, there is now conflict. They break bonds that were once strong, and they leave division in their wake. A divided house cannot stand, and this is their goal, to weaken you from the inside out. So how do we protect ourselves from these marks? First, we must recognize them for what they are. We must guard our hearts and our minds, stay rooted in truth, and build relationships of trust and unity. And when we face these influences, we must stand firm in our convictions and in our faith, knowing that true power and strength come not from control, but from love, truth, and freedom. Witches are not merely those we imagine in folklore. They are spiritual forces that operate through deception, manipulation, fear, and division. But you have the power to recognize these marks and stand firm against them. You are not a victim, you are a victor. Your mind, your will, and your spirit belong to you. No witch, no spirit, no power can take them away unless you allow it. A witch is often misunderstood and frequently misrepresented in various cultures and belief systems. When we think of a witch, many of us immediately envision an old woman in a black cloak, casting spells with a wand or stirring a cauldron. These are the images perpetuated by folklore, movies, and media. However, the true concept of a witch goes far beyond these simplistic and exaggerated depictions. A witch is not just a character from a fantasy story, but can represent a spiritual force that operates within the fabric of human experience, often manifesting in ways that are much more subtle and insidious than we realize. At its core, witchcraft is not about potions or spells as much as it is about manipulation and control. It is the use of unseen spiritual forces to influence the world and people around you. The influence of a witch isn't necessarily about being able to cast visible spells, but more about the ability to control situations, emotions, and minds, both in personal relationships and larger collective dynamics. In many ways, a witch can be someone who works behind the scenes, pulling strings, guiding decisions, and altering outcomes to serve their own purposes. This concept is not limited to a few isolated individuals who practice in secret. It can manifest in any area of life, family, community, politics, business, and even within ourselves. A witch can be someone who seeks to dominate others through subtle manipulations, causing them to act in a way that serves the witch's hidden desires. And often these individuals don't necessarily present themselves as malicious evil or even overtly manipulative. Many witches are skilled in masking their true intentions under the guise of concern, affection, or even righteousness. Witchcraft is deeply rooted in the spirit world. It is about the interaction between the physical and spiritual realms and how spiritual forces influence the behaviors, thoughts, and emotions of human beings. Witches are not always individuals wielding power for their own entertainment. Many are driven by a thirst for power, control, and a desire to manipulate their environment to meet their own needs. What makes this form of witchcraft so dangerous is its ability to subtly infiltrate the lives of others without detection, often creating chaos, confusion, and division before the truth is revealed. Understanding the concept of a witch requires a broader view, one that goes beyond appearance and understands the deeper, often invisible forces at play. It calls for a heightened awareness of how manipulation can take place in the spiritual and emotional realms, how people's minds and hearts can be swayed without them even realizing it. Recognizing this form of influence is crucial for those who seek to live with purpose and clarity, because it helps us protect ourselves from unseen spiritual attacks that can disrupt our peace, harmony, and well-being. Witchcraft, in its truest form, is fundamentally about control. While many view it through the lens of magic, potions, or spells, the core of witchcraft is rooted in the desire to manipulate and dominate. This desire isn't always visible on the surface, but it operates quietly and powerfully beneath. At the heart of witchcraft is a spiritual and emotional force that seeks to bend circumstances and individuals to its will. It's not about bringing beauty, healing, or enlightenment, but about gaining influence over people, situations, and even entire systems. A witch does not act in a way that encourages freedom. Instead, they thrive on binding others to their agenda. They look for weaknesses, emotional vulnerabilities, or open doors to exert their power, and once they gain access, they use it to manipulate, control, and lead others into doing their bidding. Whether it is through their words, actions, or even unspoken influence, witches create environments where their will becomes paramount. The key here is not the overt exercise of power, but the ability to subtly infiltrate and guide others, often without them even knowing they're being controlled. In this context, control isn't just about telling someone what to do. It's about influencing their thoughts, emotions, and decisions. A witch seeks to alter the way people think, leading them to act in a way that serves their hidden desires. They may do this by exploiting fears, insecurities, or desires, offering a sense of safety or certainty in exchange for compliance. The witch understands the emotional landscape of others and uses that knowledge to establish power. It's not about open confrontation, but about quiet, insidious influence. Control also plays out in larger context, beyond individuals, within communities, organizations, or even families. A witch may aim to create division, set people against one another, or even position themselves as the sole mediator or solution to every problem. The witch's influence, when allowed to grow, can lead to a shift in power dynamics. Others begin to rely on them for guidance, not realizing that in doing so, they've handed over the reins of their autonomy. This drive for control is driven by an internal hunger for power. And it's important to understand that for those who practice witchcraft, power is the ultimate goal. It's not about personal growth, love, or enlightenment. It's about creating a reality where others are dependent, where they are constrained in their choices and actions. For the witch, the world must revolve around their desires and ambitions. Everything and everyone becomes an instrument for fulfilling their needs. In witchcraft, control isn't always aggressive or overt. It's often cloaked in seemingly harmless gestures, offers of help, or acts of kindness. The witch may position themselves as the one who knows best, the one with the answers. But underneath it all, there is a deeper need for supremacy, for having things go according to their plans. They will manipulate circumstances, relationships, and even emotions to ensure that everything aligns with their vision. Understanding that witchcraft is about control helps us recognize the subtle ways it manifests in our lives. It isn't always dramatic or easily visible. Often it comes in the form of emotional manipulation, the twisting of truth, or the pressure to conform to someone else's will. The goal is not harmony or mutual benefit, but the elevation of one's power and authority over others. Recognizing this is the first step in protecting ourselves from such influences and remaining free to make our own choices without being subtly pulled into another's web of control. The spirit of deception is one of the most potent tools in witchcraft, often operating in the background, unseen yet deeply impactful. Deception is not just about telling lies or misleading others. It is the art of presenting something as true when it is, in fact, false. It is a calculated effort to twist reality, distort perception, and create an illusion that manipulates the minds and hearts of those who encounter it. A witch skilled in deception does not need to rely solely on overt lies. They use subtler means to mask their true intentions and actions. This spirit of deception works to cloud judgment, manipulate emotions, and ultimately pull people into a web of falsehoods that serves the witch's purpose. The power of deception lies in its ability to disarm and disorient. When a person is deceived, they often feel unsure of what to believe or whom to trust. They are left grappling with conflicting thoughts, torn between what they know in their heart and what they have been told or shown. This confusion is the perfect breeding ground for manipulation. Deception doesn't always need to be malicious. It can be so subtle that the deceived person believes they are acting in their best interest. In fact, a witch may appear helpful, loving, or concerned for the welfare of others, all while quietly leading them down a path that serves the witch's hidden agenda. The spirit of deception also thrives on the power of misdirection. A witch may focus attention on one issue, creating drama or conflict around a specific point, while all the while the true manipulation takes place in the background, unnoticed. People become distracted by the false fronts put up by the witch, and in doing so they fail to see the deeper, more insidious actions unfolding. In this way, the deceiver leads others to focus on the wrong things, keeping them from realizing what's truly going on and who is behind it all. It is not enough to simply mislead. The deception must also lead the victim away from the truth, pushing them to make decisions that, in hindsight, seem irrational or out of character. One of the key traits of the spirit of deception is the ability to create false identities or false realities. The witch often creates a persona, an image of themselves that is designed to garner trust, admiration, or affection from others. This false self is not always immediately recognizable. It may appear noble, kind, or wise, but it is, at its core, a disguise and attempt to make others see the witch in a light that serves their ultimate purpose. The witch can play the role of the trusted friend, the expert, or the victim, shifting personas as needed to manipulate those around them. And deception can also be self-deceptive. In some cases, the witch may believe their own lies, convincing themselves of their righteousness or justification in their actions. They may convince themselves that their manipulation is for the greater good, or that those they control are better off under their influence. This self-deception can make them even more dangerous, as it removes the moral barriers that might otherwise prevent them from continuing their actions. The lines between right and wrong become blurred, and they begin to see their deception as a necessary tool for their mission, justifying their means by the end they seek to achieve. A major consequence of the spirit of deception is the erosion of trust. Deception creates a world where nothing is what it seems, where people are no longer sure of who to believe or where to turn. Trust is the foundation of all healthy relationships, and when deception enters, it breaks that foundation. A person who has been deceived becomes wary, uncertain, and often defensive. They may struggle with relationships, questioning the sincerity of others or doubting their own judgments. This creates a cycle of distrust, leaving the deceiver in a position of power. For they are the one who controls the narrative, who holds the keys to the truth that others are struggling to find. Ultimately, the spirit of deception is about manipulating perception and controlling belief. It is an insidious force that operates not just through blatant falsehoods, but through the creation of false realities and distorted truths. Its impact is far-reaching, affecting not just the immediate victim, but the larger web of relationships and situations around them. In a world clouded by deception, clarity becomes a rare and precious thing. Those who are caught in the web of deception often struggle to find their way back to the truth. And the longer the deception goes unchallenged, the harder it becomes to break free. It is only through a discerning heart, a commitment to truth, and a willingness to confront falsehoods that one can break free from the spirit of deception and restore clarity to their life and relationships. Manipulating the will of others is one of the most potent and dangerous aspects of witchcraft, as it operates subtly and often without the victim's awareness. The will is the seat of decision-making, where our thoughts, desires, and actions come into alignment to direct our lives. When a witch manipulates the will of another, they are essentially taking control over that person's ability to make free, conscious choices. It is not simply about influencing decisions in a moment. It is about eroding a person's autonomy and gradually bending their desires, thoughts, and actions to serve the witch's hidden agenda. A witch who manipulates the will of others does not force them into action. Instead, they employ psychological tactics, emotional triggers, and subtle persuasion to guide the person toward a decision or action they would not have otherwise chosen. These tactics often play on the vulnerabilities, weaknesses, or insecurities of the individual. Whether it's fear, guilt, love, or a desire for validation, a witch is highly skilled at identifying the emotional triggers that will cause someone to act in ways that serve their interests. They know how to twist words, provide false reassurance, or plant suggestions that seem harmless, but ultimately lead the person down a path that will benefit the witch. One of the primary tools of this manipulation is emotional influence. The witch might create a scenario where the person feels indebted, responsible, or guilty, all of which make them more likely to comply with the witch's desires. For example, they may express a need or vulnerability that tugs at the emotions of the target, presenting themselves as someone in desperate need of help or support. The individual, driven by empathy or a sense of responsibility, might feel compelled to act, often without realizing they have been manipulated into doing so. The witch's ability to exploit these emotional triggers can cloud the judgment of the person being manipulated, making them less likely to question the motivations behind the request. Another method of manipulating the will is through creating dependency. The witch may present themselves as an indispensable figure in the person's life, offering advice, guidance, or even material support. Over time, the person comes to rely on the witch for answers, solutions, or a sense of security. Once this dependency is established, the witch subtly begins to shape the individual's decisions. The person may no longer feel capable of making choices without the witch's approval or direction. They begin to trust the witch's judgment over their own, relinquishing their free will little by little until they are fully under the influence of the witch's control. Moreover, manipulation of the will can take the form of gradual persuasion. It is not always an immediate, overt action. Often the witch plants a seed of doubt or desire and lets it grow over time, creating a shift in the person's thinking that feels organic, as if it were their own idea all along. The witch knows that if they can change a person's mindset gradually, they are less likely to resist, because they will come to believe the decision was their own and not the result of external influence. This method is incredibly dangerous because it leaves the victim unaware of how their will has been reshaped. They act in accordance with the witch's desires, but they remain convinced that they are acting on their own initiative. The power of manipulation also lies in its ability to isolate. A witch may subtly encourage the individual to distance themselves from other sources of influence or counsel, such as friends, family, or even their own intuition. By isolating the person, the witch removes alternative perspectives that might challenge their influence. The target is left in a bubble of influence where the witch's ideas are the only ones presented, and over time, this creates an environment where the individual no longer questions the choices being made. The manipulation becomes so entrenched that the victim begins to believe the witch's perspective is the only viable truth. The manipulation of the will is not only about changing what someone does, it is about altering how they perceive themselves and their ability to make decisions. A witch often works to make their victim feel weak, indecisive, or incapable of making their own choices. This fosters a sense of insecurity that makes the victim more susceptible to the witch's suggestions. The witch might position themselves as a source of strength or wisdom, feeding into the person's feelings of inadequacy. The result is that the victim comes to rely more on the witch for validation and guidance, further surrendering their autonomy. Ultimately, the manipulation of the will is an insidious form of control that strips a person of their agency, piece by piece. It doesn't happen in a single moment, but through a series of small, seemingly harmless actions that build over time. The victim may never even realize that their will has been altered or that their decisions are no longer their own. They act in ways that they believe are their own choices, but in reality, they have been subtly shaped and guided by the witch's influence. This is one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation because it leaves the victim feeling as though they are in control, even as they are being led down a path that ultimately serves the witch's desires, not their own. The use of fear and intimidation is one of the most effective and destructive tools in witchcraft, operating as a silent yet powerful force to control and manipulate others. Fear, in its essence, is a primal emotion that can cloud judgment, weaken resolve, and paralyze action. A witch understands this deeply and uses fear not as a mere tool for creating panic, but as a weapon for subduing the mind and spirit of their target. Fear, when harnessed effectively, becomes a mechanism that drives behavior, decisions, and even entire belief systems, all of which serve the witch's hidden agenda. One of the most insidious aspects of fear is how it can be manipulated to create a sense of vulnerability in a person. A witch skilled in understanding the psychological and emotional landscape of others will exploit their fears, whether they are fears of failure, loss, rejection, or even death. This is not always done overtly. Often the fear is subtly introduced or heightened through words, actions, or situations that cause the person to feel uncertain or unsafe. The witch might use threats, implied danger, or the creation of an atmosphere of instability to ensure that the target feels as though their world is out of control. In this state of fear, the victim becomes far more susceptible to influence, as their primary concern shifts from rational decision-making to seeking safety, security, and peace of mind, which the witch presents as attainable only through compliance. And intimidation, closely tied to fear, operates on a more direct level. It involves using power, presence, or behavior to instill a sense of submission in the target. The witch may employ intimidation by making threats, issuing warnings, or displaying an overt or covert display of power. They may create an atmosphere where the victim feels as though they are constantly being watched or judged, or that their every action will be met with consequences. This creates a psychological climate where the target is afraid to act independently for fear of reprisal or harm. The witch uses this fear of consequence to coerce the victim into compliance, making them feel helpless, powerless, or even undeserving of acting on their own desires or thoughts. A more subtle form of intimidation involves the manipulation of a person's social environment. The witch may plant seeds of doubt in the minds of others, turning the group or community against the target. This creates isolation and vulnerability, as the person being targeted feels abandoned or unsupported by those around them. The fear of social rejection, humiliation, or ridicule becomes a weapon, leaving the victim in a position where they will go to great lengths to avoid conflict or criticism, often to the benefit of the witch who is orchestrating this in a scenario. The witch understands that people are deeply influenced by the opinions of others, and by fostering an environment of fear and judgment, they can bend the victim's actions to their will. In some cases, fear and intimidation can manifest through gaslighting, where the witch distorts the victim's sense of reality to make them question their own perceptions and sanity. The witch might make the person doubt their own memory, experiences, or emotions, leading them to feel confused, disoriented, and unsure of themselves. This form of psychological manipulation undermines the victim's confidence and makes them more dependent on the witch's version of reality, reinforcing the power dynamic where the witch remains the sole authority. The fear of being wrong or losing control over one's own mind becomes a constant undercurrent, leaving the victim in a state of heightened anxiety and uncertainty. The witch's use of fear and intimidation also extends to the spiritual realm. In many traditions of witchcraft, fear is believed to be a conduit to greater power. By invoking fear, a witch can align themselves with spiritual forces that thrive on negative emotions. These forces can amplify the witch's influence, drawing on the fear they instill to fuel their own power. The witch might create rituals, symbols, or practices designed to evoke a sense of terror or dread, using these to bind the victim spiritually. The person targeted might feel haunted by unseen forces, constantly haunted by thoughts of danger or destruction. These spiritual fears keep the victim tethered to the witch, believing that only the witch can protect them or provide the answers they seek. Once fear and intimidation have taken root, they create a cycle that is difficult to break. The target begins to internalize the fear, often without fully realizing the extent to which their thoughts and actions are being influenced. Fear becomes a lens through which they view the world, and every decision they make is clouded by a deep-rooted anxiety about consequences, rejection, or harm. This state of constant fear eventually erodes the victim's sense of agency, making them more reliant on the witch to navigate their fears and uncertainties. The witch becomes not just a manipulator, but a perceived protector or guide, leading the victim to believe that their only safety lies in submission to the witch's will. Ultimately, the use of fear and intimidation in witchcraft is designed to keep the victim in a state of submission, confusion, and compliance. The witch understands that when a person is in fear, they are less likely to question, resist, or act on their own instincts. Fear takes away the power of choice, replaces clarity with doubt, and undermines the confidence needed to stand strong in the face of manipulation. This is why the witch's use of fear is so effective. It creates an environment where the victim is no longer in control of their own life, but is instead reacting to the emotional and psychological pressure the witch has created. Only by recognizing the presence of fear for what it is, an illusion designed to keep them under control, can the victim begin to break free from the witch's influence and reclaim their autonomy. Disharmony and division are central to the tactics of manipulation used by those who practice witchcraft. A witch understands that when people are divided, whether emotionally, spiritually, or socially, they are weakened and more easily controlled. Unity and harmony are powerful forces that build strength, trust, and cooperation, which is why witches often work to create an environment of disarray, suspicion, and discord. When people are at odds with one another, distracted by conflict, or uncertain about where they stand, they lose focus on what truly matters, and their energies are diverted into negative emotions such as anger, fear, resentment, and jealousy. This makes them vulnerable to external influences, especially the witch's manipulation. By introducing elements of disunity into relationships, communities, or organizations, the witch can turn people against each other, making it difficult for them to see the bigger picture or recognize the true source of their strife. This can be done by sowing seeds of doubt or creating misunderstandings between individuals. The witch may exploit small disagreements, amplifying them into larger issues, or they may selectively reveal information to one person while keeping others in the dark, causing feelings of betrayal, mistrust, and confusion. This divide and conquer strategy is not always immediate. It is often a slow process where the witch carefully positions themselves as the mediator or the only person who understands both sides of the conflict. Through this, they subtly position themselves as the one who holds the power to resolve the chaos they have created, further binding others to their control. The witch also thrives in environments where people are emotionally volatile, as these are fertile grounds for division. By playing on people's insecurities, fears, or pride, they can stoke the flames of anger and resentment. A witch who understands the emotional dynamics between people can easily exploit their vulnerabilities, knowing which buttons to push to provoke discord. For instance, in a close-knit group, the witch might plant a rumor or manipulate one person to feel slighted by another, causing them to react defensively. The fear of losing relationships or status may lead individuals to act impulsively, creating a chain reaction that fractures the unity among them. As conflicts escalate, the focus shifts from collaboration and mutual growth to accusations, defensiveness, and ultimately separation. Furthermore, division can also occur on a larger scale, extending beyond individuals to whole communities or even organizations. A witch may stir up social, racial, or political tensions, using division as a tool to create factions that are easier to manipulate. By emphasizing differences and deepening divides, the witch can weaken collective resolve, making it harder for groups to come together and work toward a common goal. Once division is established, the witch often steps in, positioning themselves as the solution to the chaos they have orchestrated. They may offer themselves as a mediator, a leader, or a savior, presenting themselves as the only one capable of restoring order. In doing so, they gain influence and control over both sides of the conflict, while maintaining the division that makes their power possible. The witch's ability to induce disharmony is also tied to spiritual manipulation. By creating spiritual confusion or fear, they can make individuals question their faith or beliefs, causing them to doubt their sense of self and their connections to others. This confusion is a powerful tool for division, as it causes people to withdraw into themselves, feeling lost or isolated from their spiritual community. When spiritual bonds are broken, people are more likely to be manipulated emotionally or psychologically, making them more susceptible to the witch's influence. Through spiritual division, the witch ensures that the victim feels unmoored, disconnected, and more likely to rely on the witch for guidance, validation, or comfort. The effects of disharmony and division can be devastating, not only for the individuals directly involved, but also for the broader community or society. When relationships are fractured, when trust is eroded, and when people are set against each other, the overall strength of the group diminishes. The witch's influence grows stronger as individuals begin to turn inward, seeking out solutions from sources outside the collective unity, often finding comfort in the very force that created the division. It becomes a cycle where the more division there is, the more the witch's power increases. The individuals and groups involved may never fully realize the extent to which they have been manipulated, as the discord feels natural, as though it arose from internal issues rather than external interference. Disharmony also opens the door to deeper spiritual attacks. In an environment where division reigns, the door is wide open for negative spiritual forces to take hold. Anger, hatred, and bitterness create spiritual toxins that cloud judgment and spiritual clarity. The witch, often in control of these forces, uses them to further their own ends, ensuring that the environment remains charged with negative energy that hinders healing, growth, and reconciliation. The more disjointed and fragmented a community becomes, the harder it is to repair the bonds of trust and understanding that were once strong. By dividing people from one another, the witch ensures that the collective energy that might otherwise be used for collective good is instead wasted on internal strife and separation. The witch's ultimate goal is to weaken the spirit of unity, creating an atmosphere where only they can provide direction, resolution, or solace. They thrive in the chaos they have created, feeding off the confusion and division, until the relationships and bonds that once held a group or community together are so fractured that they can never be fully restored. This division becomes their greatest asset, allowing them to remain in the shadows, controlling and influencing people without ever revealing their true role in the breakdown of harmony. The power of words is one of the most profound and transformative forces in existence, and those who understand how to wield this power, such as witches, use it with great precision to manipulate, control, and influence others. Words carry energy, and they shape reality by shaping perception. What we speak, hear, and believe can influence our emotions, our thoughts, and our actions in ways we may not even realize. A witch, knowing this truth, uses words not merely to communicate, but to cast spells, create illusions, and subtly alter the course of events. The true power of words lies not just in what is said, but in how they are received, interpreted, and internalized. Words have the power to build and destroy. They can heal or wound, inspire or discourage, elevate or diminish. When a witch speaks, they understand the weight their words carry, and how they can plant seeds that grow into actions, beliefs, and decisions. A carefully chosen phrase can evoke fear, love, anger, or desire, often in ways that the target does not fully comprehend. This power lies in the ability of words to bypass rational thought and speak directly to the emotional core of a person, where their most vulnerable aspects reside. By addressing these emotions, a witch can gain deep access to an individual's psyche, influencing their decisions and actions in subtle yet significant ways. One of the most potent ways that words are used in witchcraft is through suggestion. A witch may speak words that seem harmless on the surface, but when carefully placed, these words can plant an idea or a belief that takes root in the mind of the listener. This suggestion works like a seed planted in fertile soil. Over time, the seed grows into a belief or action that seems natural to the one who received it. The witch might tell someone they are weak or incapable, and over time that person begins to internalize that belief, making them more likely to act in a way that reflects this new identity. Alternatively, a witch may use words to inflate someone's ego, leading them to believe they are destined for greatness, thus making them more susceptible to the witch's influence and control. Words can also be used to isolate or divide. A witch knows how to use words to turn people against each other, to sow discord and mistrust within relationships, families, or communities. A simple whisper, a carefully timed rumor, or a subtle accusation can alter the dynamics between people, creating rifts that may seem impossible to mend. In this way, the witch manipulates not just individual hearts and minds, but entire social systems, breaking down bonds of trust and unity that otherwise might have been unshakable. The power of words to divide is especially dangerous because it often operates behind the scenes, with the true source of division remaining hidden, while those caught in the web of deception fight amongst themselves. On a deeper level, the witch's words may be imbued with mystical power, using incantations, chants, or prayers that are intended to invoke specific energies or forces. These words are not merely random, they are carefully selected for their spiritual significance, their ability to call upon forces that can affect the material and spiritual worlds. By speaking certain words, a witch can tap into spiritual realms, calling forth protection, curse, or blessing. The vibrations and frequencies of the words resonate with unseen forces, allowing the witch to manipulate the spiritual environment to their advantage. This is why many witches believe that language has a sacred and powerful quality, and that words spoken with intent can alter the fabric of reality itself. In addition, the power of words extends to how they are used to reinforce control. The witch might repeat certain phrases or mantras to keep their victim locked into a particular frame of mind or emotional state. By bombarding the person with the same words over and over, they reinforce a specific belief or feeling that aligns with the witch's will. This repetition creates a rhythm, a constant echo in the person's mind that drowns out their own independent thoughts. It is a psychological tactic that gradually wears down resistance, leaving the victim in a state of confusion or dependence. The witch's words become the dominant voice in the person's mind, overriding their own sense of self and autonomy. Furthermore, the words a witch speaks are often tailored to the specific needs and vulnerabilities of the individual they are influencing. A witch understands the nuances of language, knowing when to speak softly, when to be forceful, when to soothe, and when to provoke. Their words are not arbitrary, but strategically crafted to align with the emotional state, desires, and weaknesses of their target. A witch may speak in riddles or metaphors, leaving the victim to interpret their words, often leading them into confusion. This ambiguity is part of the power, as it keeps the victim off balance, unsure of whether the words are meant to help or harm. The mystery surrounding the words only adds to their effectiveness, as the victim may spend much of their time trying to understand their true meaning, which only gives the witch more time to shape the outcome. Words also play a critical role in the psychological warfare that witches often wage. They may use words to undermine a person's sense of self-worth, planting seeds of doubt or insecurity that grow into deep feelings of inadequacy. With just a few well-placed phrases, a witch can alter the way someone sees themselves, making them feel less confident, more dependent, or more fearful. The ability to manipulate perception through language is one of the most dangerous aspects of witchcraft, as it can permanently alter how an individual relates to themselves and the world around them. These words are not just harmful in the moment they linger, echoing in the victim's mind long after the conversation is over. The power of words also extends to the spiritual domain. Words can be used to bind or to free, to heal or to harm. A witch might speak incantations or prayers that tap into the unseen realms, invoking forces that shape the spiritual atmosphere around the person. This ability to speak directly to the spiritual forces that influence the material world is one of the most profound uses of words in witchcraft. The words spoken during these rituals carry weight far beyond their immediate context, as they are believed to command spiritual entities or energies that can impact the course of events. The power of words cannot be underestimated, as they hold the ability to shape realities, influence actions, and control destinies. In the hands of a skilled witch, words become more than simple communication. They become tools of transformation and control. By understanding the emotional, psychological, and spiritual power of language, a witch can weave webs of influence that subtly alter the lives of others. Whether through suggestion, division, repetition, or spiritual invocation, the witch's words carry the weight of intention and can profoundly impact the course of human affairs. A desire for power is one of the most potent and dangerous driving forces behind witchcraft. At its core, this desire is not just about achieving dominance over others, but about controlling the very elements that govern life, manipulating energies, and shaping reality itself. For those who practice witchcraft, power is seen as the ultimate means to attain their goals, whether those goals are personal, financial, spiritual, or social. It is the pursuit of control that drives them to seek out forbidden knowledge, to perform rituals, and to tap into unseen forces that most people never even consider. This hunger for power is insatiable, and it creates a cycle where the witch's actions are constantly geared toward gaining more influence, more control, and more command over the physical and spiritual worlds. A person consumed by a desire for power seeks to transcend the limitations that life imposes. They are driven by a deep dissatisfaction with their current state of existence, whether that be in their personal life, their relationships, or their spiritual journey. The power they seek is often framed as the key to breaking free from those limitations and achieving what they believe to be their true potential. They feel that only by gaining control over external circumstances and forces can they find fulfillment and purpose. But this desire for power goes beyond material wealth or social standing. It is about elevating oneself to a place where they are not bound by the rules, the limitations, or the expectations that govern the lives of ordinary people. Witches are often deeply aware of the fragility of human existence and the limitations of the physical world. The desire for power in this context represents an effort to transcend those limitations, to rise above the struggles of the mortal realm, and to control the forces of nature, the spiritual realm, and the lives of others. They seek not just to wield power over themselves, but to control others, to manipulate circumstances, and to influence the direction of events in their favor. This power allows them to escape the perceived weakness of human limitations and replace them with a sense of godlike control and authority. The desire for power is often rooted in a deep-seated insecurity. Many who pursue power do so because they feel inadequate, unnoticed, or unimportant. They long to be seen, to be recognized, and to be admired. The thirst for power becomes a way to compensate for their perceived weaknesses or fears. It offers them a sense of superiority, a way to prove to themselves and to the world that they are not insignificant or powerless. This hunger for recognition can be dangerous as it drives them to seek control over everything and everyone around them. It becomes an obsession where their identity is increasingly tied to their ability to exert influence, control, and dominance. The pursuit of power often involves an unrelenting need to prove oneself, to demonstrate strength, and to secure a position of influence over others. Those with a deep desire for power often seek to manipulate others through charm, coercion, or outright intimidation. They recognize that in order to achieve their goals, they must control the actions, behaviors, and decisions of those around them. Whether in personal relationships, in the workplace, or within larger social structures, these individuals will go to great lengths to ensure that their influence is pervasive and that they are the ones who shape outcomes and determine the course of events. A desire for power, when coupled with witchcraft, becomes even more potent because it aligns with the forces of the unseen world. The witch believes that they can tap into spiritual energies, use incantations, and summon otherworldly powers to bend the physical and spiritual realms to their will. They may perform rituals to gain power, whether it is through the use of sacred objects, invoking spirits, or performing elaborate ceremonies. Each act is designed to draw them closer to the ultimate goal of control over not just their own fate, but the fate of others and the world around them. Through these actions, the witch believes that they can rise above ordinary human existence and enter a realm where they are masters of destiny. The desire for power often blinds the individual to the moral and ethical consequences of their actions. Those who hunger for power are willing to sacrifice anything in pursuit of their goals. They may exploit others, deceive them, or use fear and manipulation to bend them to their will. Relationships are viewed as transactional. If someone is useful for the witch's purposes, they will be valued. If they are not, they will be discarded without hesitation. The pursuit of power justifies any action in the eyes of the witch, as the end goal is so all-consuming that it eclipses any consideration of harm caused along the way. For the witch, power is not just about achieving a position of influence, but about having the ability to affect change in the world around them. The desire to wield power is often accompanied by a sense of destiny or mission. The witch may believe that they are meant to bring about a particular outcome or change the course of history. They may view themselves as chosen or anointed to carry out a specific purpose, and in this way they justify their pursuit of power as something greater than personal ambition. Their sense of self-importance is inflated by the belief that they have been given the responsibility to reshape reality according to their desires. As their power grows, so too does their need for more. The witch who seeks power is never satisfied. The more they acquire, the more they want. This is because the desire for power is fundamentally about control over the world, control over others, and control over fate. Each victory, each conquest brings with it the desire for more, as the witch continually strives to increase their sphere of influence. This hunger for power feeds on itself, growing exponentially as the witch's influence expands. What was once enough is no longer sufficient, and the pursuit of control becomes a never-ending cycle, where the witch is perpetually chasing the next source of power, the next way to assert dominance. In the end, the desire for power is a destructive force. It consumes everything in its path, leaving behind a trail of broken relationships, shattered lives, and moral decay. The witch, in their pursuit of power, may lose their humanity in the process. What begins as a desire to transcend limitations and gain control eventually turns into an insatiable thirst that overrides all other values and considerations. The quest for power becomes all-encompassing, and the person who once sought to better themselves may find themselves consumed by the very forces they tried to control. The price of this power is often too high, as it leads to isolation, corruption, and a deepening emptiness that can never be filled. The witch, blinded by their desire for power, may eventually realize that in their quest to control everything, they have lost everything that truly mattered. False identity and self-exaltation are deeply intertwined in the pursuit of power through witchcraft. The desire to project a false identity is not merely about presenting oneself as someone different, it's about creating a persona that allows one to escape from the limitations, insecurities, and weaknesses that define the human condition. This false identity is often rooted in a desire to appear more powerful, more knowledgeable, or more influential than one truly is. It becomes a mask, a facade that hides the true self, and in some cases a tool to manipulate and control others. For those who seek power through witchcraft, crafting this identity is a way to distance themselves from vulnerability and portray an image of strength, wisdom, and authority that is not necessarily earned but fabricated. In the world of witchcraft, this false identity is often built upon exaggerated or distorted traits. The individual may project themselves as a master of the occult, someone with secret knowledge, a figure who has transcended the ordinary realm of existence. This self-exaltation is central to the persona they create, making them appear as though they possess a unique connection to spiritual forces, or that they hold the keys to unlocking hidden truths about the universe. In doing so, they elevate themselves in the eyes of others, gaining influence and respect through their fabricated power. The false identity serves as a means to command awe, inspire fear, or demand submission, positioning them as a figure above others, even though the reality of their true nature may be far more ordinary and less extraordinary than the persona they wish to convey. Self-exaltation is a natural extension of this false identity. Those who are consumed by witchcraft often seek not only to craft a different image of themselves, but to glorify their own importance, status, and perceived superiority. They seek to elevate themselves above others, making themselves the center of attention, the one who commands respect, and the one who has all the answers. This process involves inflating their self-worth and reinforcing the idea that they are exceptional or divine in some way. They may use their knowledge of rituals, their understanding of spiritual matters, or their influence over others to assert dominance, convincing themselves and others that they are beyond reproach and that their power is a reflection of their superiority. This false sense of superiority leads to a constant need to assert one's importance. The individual who exalts themselves in this way is often caught in a cycle of needing constant validation, admiration, and recognition. They seek to surround themselves with followers, students, or worshippers who reinforce the notion that they are a powerful and revered figure. The more they are praised, the more they crave it, and the more they crave it, and the more they seek to expand their influence. Their identity becomes inextricably linked to the adoration and respect they receive, and any challenge to this image is perceived as a direct threat to their carefully constructed self-identity. The exaltation of the self becomes an insatiable hunger, a need for constant affirmation, and a desire to continually remind others of their status, their knowledge, and their power. Self-exaltation through a false identity often leads to a disconnect from reality. The more someone feeds into this inflated persona, the more detached they become from who they truly are. Their sense of self is no longer grounded in authenticity, but in the image they project. They may lose sight of their own flaws, vulnerabilities, and limitations, seeing them as weaknesses that must be hidden or denied. This can result in a deep internal conflict where the false identity becomes so dominant that the true self is overshadowed or even suppressed. The person may begin to believe their own lies, seeing themselves not as they truly are, but as the exaggerated figure they have created. This disconnect leads to a sense of inner emptiness, as the self-exaltation feeds only the ego, not the soul, leaving the person spiritually bankrupt despite their outward appearance of power and strength. In relationships and interactions with others, this false identity can be extremely damaging. Those around the person may feel manipulated or controlled, drawn into the illusion of the witch's exalted status. The witch may demand respect, obedience, and loyalty based on their self-created image, using fear, charm, or coercion to maintain their influence. They may try to convince others that their insight, wisdom, or spiritual power is unmatched, leading people to place them on a pedestal and treat them as infallible. However, this dynamic is inherently fragile. The more the witch relies on the false identity and the inflated self-image, the more dependent they become on the opinions and actions of others. The slightest challenge or questioning of their authority threatens to unravel the illusion, and the witch will often go to great lengths to protect their constructed image, resorting to manipulation or intimidation to preserve their elevated status. The pursuit of a false identity through self-exaltation can also isolate the individual from genuine connection and understanding. By positioning themselves as superior to others, the witch creates barriers that prevent true intimacy, trust, and vulnerability. Relationships are no longer based on equality and mutual respect, but on power dynamics and control. The witch sees others as tools to be used either to reinforce their image or to serve their agenda, rather than as individuals with their own worth and needs. This creates a deep loneliness, as the person is trapped in a world of illusions, unable to experience authentic love, compassion, or friendship. They may have many followers or admirers, but these relationships are often half and hollow, built on the false premise of their exalted status rather than true human connection. Moreover, the false identity and self-exaltation can lead to spiritual decay. In witchcraft, as with any system that seeks to elevate the self above others, there is often a disconnection from the true essence of spiritual life. The witch may become obsessed with their own power, their own abilities, and their own importance, rather than focusing on humility, service, and connection to the divine. This false self becomes a barrier to true spiritual growth, as it is based on ego, pride, and the need for external validation, rather than on inner transformation, self-awareness, and alignment with higher truths. The more one clings to the false identity, the more they cut themselves off from the deeper spiritual realities that require humility, surrender, and authenticity. In the end, the pursuit of a false identity and the exaltation of the self leads only to self-destruction. The ego grows unchecked, feeding off external praise and recognition, while the true self withers away, buried beneath layers of illusion and pride. The witch, in their desire to appear all-powerful, may lose sight of the very humanity and spirituality that they sought to enhance. The false identity they have crafted becomes a prison, trapping them in a cycle of isolation, fear, and emptiness, as the hunger for recognition and power becomes insatiable, yet never fulfilling. It is a tragic irony that in seeking to exalt themselves, they end up diminishing their true self, forfeiting peace, authenticity, and genuine connection with others and the divine. Spiritual and emotional manipulation are some of the most insidious and effective tools in the hands of those who seek control and power. In the context of witchcraft, these forms of manipulation are often woven into the very fabric of practice. They operate subtly, often unseen, yet have profound effects on the mind, heart, and soul of those targeted. These methods exploit deep vulnerabilities in individuals, using their emotions, fears, and spiritual beliefs to bend them to the manipulator's will. Spiritual manipulation begins when the practitioner uses spiritual beliefs, rituals, and symbols to control others. The manipulator may present themselves as having superior spiritual knowledge, access to divine or mystical powers, or as someone who can mediate between the individual and higher spiritual realms. By presenting themselves as a spiritual authority, they place themselves in a position of power and influence where their guidance is trusted without question. Those around them may come to believe that they are spiritually inferior and that their only path to growth or enlightenment lies in the hands of the manipulator. This dynamic creates an atmosphere of dependency where the victim believes that they must rely on the manipulator for spiritual direction and growth. One of the key tactics in spiritual manipulation is the use of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of spiritual punishment, or fear of being cut off from divine favor can be used to keep someone in line. The manipulator may subtly suggest that the individual is in spiritual danger unless they adhere to specific practices or follow certain rules. By fostering a sense of fear and uncertainty, the manipulator creates an environment where the individual feels they cannot trust their own judgment and instead must defer to the manipulator for guidance. This creates a deep sense of emotional vulnerability where the victim feels isolated and powerless without the manipulator's presence or approval. Emotional manipulation in the context of witchcraft is no less potent. It involves exploiting the emotional states, needs, and desires of others to exert control. Emotional manipulation can manifest in various forms, from guilt-tripping to gaslighting, or even fostering feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt. The manipulator might use emotions as a weapon, creating a false sense of intimacy or love to establish trust and dependency. Once the emotional connection is formed, they use this bond to manipulate the victim into making decisions or taking actions that benefit the manipulator, often at the victim's expense. An effective emotional manipulator knows how to appeal to the deepest insecurities and desires of the person they wish to control. For example, they may feed into the victim's sense of loneliness, making them feel that the manipulator is the only one who truly understands them. They might use flattery or praise to boost the victim's self-esteem, only to later use that praise as a means of demanding loyalty or compliance. In some cases, the manipulator may play on the victim's feelings of guilt or shame, convincing them that they owe their loyalty, love, or service to the manipulator for some perceived favor or blessing. This creates an unhealthy dynamic where the victim feels bound to the manipulator emotionally, often feeling as though they cannot escape the connection, even if they realize it is unhealthy or damaging. Another common form of emotional manipulation is playing on someone's fears or insecurities. The manipulator may deliberately target the victim's vulnerabilities, whether they are emotional wounds, past traumas, or fears about their future. By exploiting these emotional weaknesses, they create a sense of dependency where the victim feels unable to move forward in their life without the manipulator's support or intervention. This can manifest in the form of emotional blackmail, where the victim is made to feel that their happiness, safety, or spiritual well-being is dependent on pleasing or appeasing the manipulator. Spiritual and emotional manipulation also work in tandem to create a state of confusion and vulnerability in the victim. The manipulator may present themselves as a spiritual guide, offering wisdom or enlightenment, while simultaneously manipulating the victim's emotions to keep them under control. For example, they might tell the victim that their emotional turmoil is a sign of spiritual imbalance or weakness, suggesting that only the manipulator can help them find peace or healing. By positioning themselves as the sole authority over both the victim's spiritual and emotional well-being, the manipulator ensures that the victim's sense of self and direction becomes completely entangled with their influence. As the victim becomes more emotionally and spiritually dependent, they are less likely to question the manipulator's motives or methods. They may begin to believe that the manipulator's decisions are divinely inspired or for their ultimate good, even if the actions taken result in harm. This creates a cycle of control, where the victim's own desires and needs are subjugated to the manipulator's will. The victim may find themselves drawn into a series of actions, rituals, or behaviors that are dictated by the manipulator, all under the guise of spiritual or emotional growth. Spiritual and emotional manipulation can also involve the deliberate creation of division between the victim and their support systems. The manipulator might try to isolate the victim from family, friends, or other sources of support, creating a situation where the victim feels that they have nowhere to turn but to the manipulator. This isolation further deepens the victim's dependence as they come to rely entirely on the manipulator for validation, emotional comfort, and spiritual guidance. The manipulator may subtly sow seeds of doubt about the victim's relationships with others, telling them that they are not understood or appreciated by those outside the group or belief system. By fostering these feelings of alienation, the manipulator solidifies their role as the sole provider of support and guidance, making it increasingly difficult for the victim to break free from their influence. This form of manipulation is particularly dangerous because it often operates under the guise of love, care, or spiritual concern. The manipulator may present themselves as a benevolent figure, someone who only wants what is best for the victim, while all the while using their power to exploit and control. The victim, often blinded by their emotional connection or spiritual beliefs, may fail to see the manipulation at work. They may come to believe that the manipulator's control is an expression of love or divine purpose, not realizing that they are being used as a pawn in a much larger game of power and control. Ultimately, spiritual and emotional manipulation serves to erode the victim's sense of self, their autonomy, and their ability to think critically. By manipulating both the victim's emotions and spiritual beliefs, the manipulator creates a distorted reality where the victim's true desires and needs are secondary to the manipulator's agenda. This form of control not only exploits the individual's vulnerabilities, but also traps them in a cycle of dependence, where they believe that their spiritual growth, emotional healing, and personal power are tied solely to the manipulator's influence. It is a destructive dynamic, one that can lead to long-term psychological, emotional, and spiritual harm. The marks of a witch reveal a dark truth about the power of manipulation and control. Whether through deceit, fear, or emotional and spiritual domination, those who seek to wield power over others often do so by exploiting vulnerabilities and creating false identities. They prey upon the desires, insecurities, and weaknesses of others, leading them into a cycle of dependence and disillusionment. But we must recognize that true strength does not come from manipulating or controlling others. It comes from embracing our own authenticity, from standing in our own power, and from seeking to lift others up, not tear them down. Each one of us has a responsibility to protect our minds, spirits, and hearts from the subtle forces that seek to enslave us. We must be vigilant in guarding against the tactics of manipulation and falsehood, and instead choose the path of truth, integrity, and love. We are not defined by the control others seek to impose on us, but by the strength of our own character and the wisdom we cultivate within ourselves. Let us reject false power, reject division, and choose unity and compassion. Let us not fall into the traps of manipulation, but rise above them with clarity and discernment. True power lies in the ability to empower others, to uplift and inspire, not in the ability to control or dominate. As we move forward, let us remember that the most powerful force in the universe is love and truth, never manipulation or deceit, and that these forces will guide us toward a better, more unified world.